Hey everybody, Edo here, and I have Seth and Jessey with me again, almost as if we're still here, but instead of talking about role-playing games, we are going to be talking about cooperative games. This was another request from the Gaming with Edo Kickstarter, and really it was just by somebody who loves cooperative games and super interested in cooperative games. I haven't made a cooperative game yet, I don't think, though I think you can consider the Siblings Trouble Cooperative.
That's true.
Okay, so cooperative board games, how might we categorize it, right? There's generally your pandemic style.
Yes.
Everyone has a different action or role working together. You have turns, but you don't have hidden information, right? Mm-hmm. Some might call that sort of alpha gamer prone, right?
Well, yeah. The hidden information, whether or not you have hidden information, is sort of an interesting thing to incorporate into your definition of a cooperative game, because the usual solution to the so-called alpha gamer problem is, oh, just hide information. But then if it's fully cooperative and it does first the game, then why wouldn't we just tell everybody what we have? And then the next step is, well, we'll add a traitor, but now you don't have a cooperative game anymore.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's you know, 'cause role-playing games are almost exclusively, that's probably incorrect actually, but a lot of role-playing games are cooperative, right? But you do that by having you do have an adversary, who's driving
a traitor.
You have a traitor, yeah. They're not hidden.
So there's that type. There are also cooperative games, arguably, where you're cooperating on a team. Team versus team, you could look at it as cooperative. Like
Captain Sonar.
Captain Sonar is a great example where you really do have a group of people working together. And then you have another group of people working together against you. And then is there anything else that we'd want to lump into there around, you know, I don't know, games that incentivize collusion or working together like
I mean, diplomacy does that, and diplomacy is by no means a cooperative game.
Yeah, like a different one.
It's like the anti-cooperative
when I was thinking about it, I was like, yeah, actually, Siblings Trouble was cooperative. What am I thinking? But Liftoff was always this, I called it semi-cooperative, because you're all trying to get your aliens off the planet, but you're still trying to be the player who gets all of your aliens off the planet first.
Right.
And so there's sort of a phase of the game where you're we're working together, and then that falls away. I don't think in the definition of cooperative games that most people think of, we would be doing that.
I don't think that cooperative games necessarily mean that there can't be a winner, right? I mean, a theoretical cooperative game where there is a goal we are all trying to accomplish, but the amount we contribute towards progress is part of it. I mean,
Castle Panic does that.
Yeah, exactly right. You know, you can say I have accomplished this score, but we've all accomplished our kind of combined meta goal.
Right.
I think that's still cooperative.
Dead of Winter, I think, if I'm recalling correctly, also has that structure.
Yeah, and then they also, in Dead of Winter, you have what you mentioned earlier, which is that traitor bit where one player can sort of undermine, is undermining, or what's that bigger, the space, the TV show, space one, I'm forgetting it right now. But, so, and what do we think about that? What do we think about cooperative games? Like, you know, going back to your earlier comments, that idea of protecting from the alpha gamer, right? Yeah. A game that's like, this can play 1 to 5, and there's no difference if the one player is willing to look at everyone's hand and just follow the roles.
Yeah.
Is that more table dynamics, or should the game designer developer actually actively try to thwart that behavior?
I think you should have, if you're designing a cooperative game, you should definitely spend some time thinking about the alpha gamer, like the potential of an alpha gamer situation. And you should be committed to your decision about whether or not you want to actually, like, intentionally.
So you consider that to be like an actual,
but you need to
thought
decide
point for working.
Absolutely. Because, well, I mean, for one, just speaking from a designer's perspective, someone who's pitched cooperative games before, I often, when I sit down with a publisher and put a cooperative game on the table, the first question I'll usually get is, do you think the alpha gamer is a problem? And my answer determines whether or not they say, carry on.
Yeah.
So you should, if you're designing a cooperative game, like, know that publishers are thinking about whether or not they care about the alpha gamer problem. And so you should too.
And, and I think if you're addressing it, it needs to be basically at the heart of the design. You know,
it is.
Whatever core mechanic you come up with has to address that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting now. Again, now that I'm like, oh yeah, I did do Siblings Trouble. In the Siblings Trouble, you're all part of that is every character telling their own story. So that does because it's narrative driven. In many ways, it's sort of impossible. Like I've played with young kids, and you're sort of suggesting things like, "Hey, why don't you talk about?"
But I can't tell you.
but yeah, you're actually got to tell the story of your character. It doesn't. It's just weird. You're like it's hyper alpha. Be like, I'm going to play your part now.
Right.
So that did address it, but I don't think that's a common tool.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that does it narratively, which is functionally different from mechanically. You know, say if we're playing Flashpoint, you know, you could say, "Oh, it's most mechanically advantageous if you move your firefighter over there and fight the fire in this way." You know, that's. For some reason, that's acceptable in table dynamics in a way that me telling you what your character does isn't.
Well, and you'd be surprised, but there's lots of little behaviors that I think don't fall into what people normally think of as alpha behavior that undermine cooperation a little bit. Things like handing somebody a card from a deck or moving their pawn, not necessarily being the one to tell you where to go, but just starting to manage the table and manage power dynamics that, you know, ultimately, and a lot of times it's not always, but oftentimes that alpha gamer is the one who's teaching everyone the game, right? So there's this weird flow over from I'm teaching you how to play to playing for you. Right. And I think there's a lot of things you can be careful there.
Yeah, and that's actually one of, I think, the most common sources of an alpha dynamic in an arbitrary play group is somebody knows the game better. And so you're not on equal footing as collaborators. The reason I actually stopped playing Pandemic with friends is because I'd started playing it solo by myself. And I started understanding the system at a level that my friends didn't. And it was hard for me to sit there playing a 4-player game because I normally play 4 characters by myself, and I can see why you are making mistakes. You're not appreciating, and it's just, there's no way for them to catch up.
I can feel it bubbling up right now.
So I love Pandemic, but I just can't play it.
Well, and we found that in a lot in Legacy, which was, there were places where it was sort of like, we really should do this, but we're going to have a table vote about it just to like loosen that up. Yeah. I think the Legacy games are really interesting in that regard because it's a degree of it's a long commitment to cooperate with a table, and and even some of those games again without in narrative ways try to undermine that a little bit. I don't want to go into any more details on it, but I think that it's interesting having played. So I played Pandemic Legacy, and I'm playing Charterstone, and I was going to do a Charterstone review, and it's not cooperative. I hadn't played any Legacy games that were not cooperative, and we're playing a competitive Legacy game. And it was like, oh, this is so much more fun. Not that it's not fun. Like a cooperative game, I think is like a very different experience. But like when you're playing a zippy, just competitive game, like I don't know. I felt like it reminded me. I had sort of associated Legacy with cooperative, but there's no reason it has to be.
I mean, I think something that's a little slower and more consensus-driven isn't necessarily a bad game. I was making a list of games before we were talking, and one of the ones I thought of was Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective.
I haven't played this one.
I really love it because it's pure story, and that as a table, whether it's one person or 5, we're sitting around getting bits of information, and then basically kind of our collective detective, our hive mind, is working on what are we making of that information? How are we going to come to a solution? I personally find that a really rewarding and compelling experience.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's other degrees of that. Like when you said that, probably because of the detective bit, but I started thinking of Mysterium, which thematically has you all on the same time, but mechanically, you trying to figure out what happened to this other player, you're really not on a team together at all.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're very much trying to beat everyone else and get there first. I mean, I think there might be some lose case where you don't figure it out and you all lose or something like that, but it doesn't. You're not really incentivized to like truly help somebody else.
Well, it's right on the edge of a trader mechanic,
right.
Like Battlestar Galactica, where
that was
you're all working together.
A space game, TV show,
where you're all working together right until you aren't.
Right.
Or there's one, what's Alcatraz, the Turncoat, I think it's called, where you're all trying to escape from Alcatraz, but at the end, someone has to be left behind. And so everyone's working together right until the very end, then you go like, aha, we're going to screw you. You get to stay and take the heat. Or There's a really old game that I love, Escape from Colditz, which is where you're escaping from a Nazi prison in World War II. And it's a roll and move game, and it has problems, but I really like, again, that you are working together, at least in the sense that you're creating some opportunities and gathering escape equipment and things like that, and watching the guards. And
yeah, for sure. No, and when one player plays as the guards. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's interesting, in terms of trying to think if any favorites stick out. I mean, the other thing I think to some degree, coming to your impatience bit, has to do with whether or not. No, I'm just whether or not you how. One of the things I find in cooperative games, which is sort of the alpha game, sort of not, is everyone being aligned in what they want to get out of the game experience. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like some people want to win, and some people are just having fun playing. And I think even in a cooperative game, there's a little bit more room for let's just play together. And I think that can be a little bit of a challenge.
But I think a good cooperative game pushes you pretty clearly down a path. I mean, no one in Flashpoint doesn't want to put out the fire. No one in Forbidden Island doesn't want to get off the island.
Yeah. Oh, Forbidden Island, right? They just announced Forbidden Sky, so that's moving along. But that's a nice lighter weight one. But I am a little bit tired of, honestly, the simplified mechanic meets one, player. Like you each get a role that gives you an ability, and you're all playing a game where you need to use everyone's ability. I've sort of played that now a little.
So cooperative game is essentially a teamwork game.
Yeah, it's a teamwork game, but I feel like people think of a cooperative game and they're like, oh, that's a game where you're playing a game with a set of rules and you give each player one slight variant ability, and that's cooperative game. That's the definition for a lot of players.
Sure. Yeah. Because my favorite cooperative game, I think, is the ultimate teamwork game, which is Space Alert. Right. Which does almost fit your model, except then on top of it they layer intense time pressure and too much going on for any one person to try and piece everything together.
Right, and I would agree with that. I mean, and I think that's another place where you put the cooperative in a different way, right? When you think of Captain Sonar, or I think of the first one, which I like more than Captain Sonar actually, which was Space Cadet Dice Duel.
Oh yeah,
which is it's frantic dice, cooperative frantic dice teamwork. It's just a very different experience.
Yeah.
Along those lines, the games we haven't talked about, which are amazing, are all the exit games and the puzzle games,
the escape room games.
Escape room games. To me, they're
kind of similar to the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, where you're kind of a hive mind type thing.
Yeah, well, and I think to me that's a really wonderful, different way of doing cooperative gaming, where you're really working together. Problem solving, to me, is just a very different dynamic than playing these board game mechanics and taking turns doing it, and so those have been awesome. I love playing those with them.
And well done ones will give every player something to do, which is sometimes what it can feel like. The simplified games like Forbidden Island don't really give you enough to feel like I'm contributing. But in a good escape room, I haven't played a lot of the board games, but I've done a number of real escape rooms. The really good ones, puzzles are set up and distributed in a way so that nobody's ever static. We're either collectively working on a tough problem, or we're separately working on sort of medium to easy difficulty problems.
And I feel like there's enough range in there. I don't think the skill set for being good at Pandemic, Flashpoint, Forbidden Island is any different. The player that's great at that, and in any of those games is probably great at all of those games. I feel like the escape room games, there really are categories where these are visual puzzles, and these are if you're Mensa, right? Maybe it's all easy for you, but I feel like the types of puzzles you're seeing stress what wouldn't naturally come. You really know this sort of information, or a trivia game, right? But where it's grabbing on all these different types of skills and abilities that it's unlikely for one player to just lock down and have.
So it's not forcing the rules upon you like Pandemic. It's saying, what do you bring to the table?
Yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is, in all likelihood,
so it may overlap.
Right, but I'm saying in all likelihood, it isn't likely that you bring it all to the table, is what I'm trying to say. Where I think, if you're really good at most of those games, you're basically bringing all the skills to the table every time, and then people aren't going to play as well. I also think it's interesting, this is just playing Pandemic Legacy, it was with some really good friends, a couple we liked, they got kids with our kids, and we'd set up the whole thing, but it'd be we'd hang out once every couple weeks, and there was always this period where everyone wanted to talk before we started playing. And so at first I would try to like, this is really, but I would try to like not rush to talk and be like, hey, it's all set up, ready to go. You ready? You ready? You ready? We can start playing.
You're the alpha meta player.
No, yeah, like I don't need to control the game. I just want us to start. It was like not about winning. It was like, but I had to change my way of. I had to be patient. See, and just be like, no, let's just all talk. You tell me when we're all done talking, and then we'll start.
You just have to keep one piece off the table, and when everyone's ready, then you finally go.
And we're
okay,
good.
now we go.
Now we go.
I think that actually points to an important like design space though for cooperative games, which is games that are cooperative but also leave room for having conversation while you're playing.
Sure.
I don't know what a game would look like that fits that bill, but I like for the reasons that your group of friends would.
I can give you an answer to that question.
Talk so long before playing Pandemic. Like part of the reason you get together with friends and you want to play cooperative games is because you want to spend time together.
Yeah. So this is I don't know if you're familiar with the game. The game. Oh. This was
the one that I just lost, or
no? This is an alternate version, which is arted by Beth Sobol. The other one has got like dark skulls on it.
Yeah,
like, it's like super dark.
Yeah.
But this is a pretty light game where all we're doing is there's this isn't on table, but basically you're like counting up on on two of these cards and counting down on the others, and we all have hands of like 1 through 100. So we're all just trying to we try to get. Winning is everyone plays every one of their cards without losing. And so I'm not going to explain the entire game, but basically it's basically a like card game where you're just sort of like picking your card and playing it. But it does have room for...
It does, however, fight the alpha player thing by explicitly putting limits on what you're allowed to say.
Absolutely. It does have... It has clear...
So it allows conversation, but only in strict bounds.
Well, yeah, it's like you can't say what cards you have in that kind of thing. And I think... You know, when we did Siblings Trouble, we added a couple page book in there, which is like, here's how to think about telling stories. And I think, I don't think it's unheard of, especially if your game's more lightweight, not Gloomhaven per se, but more lightweight in terms of, hey, here's some tidbits on not how to ruin a cooperative game or how not to ruin a cooperative game. I don't think
to help people engage, with your kind of intended experience.
Yeah. And so, and I think thinking about cooperation as cooperative storytelling, cooperative abilities or skill sets, cooperative puzzle solving. There's just different ways people can put their brains together. I think there's a lot of I used to do as a kid tons of Project Challenge stuff, and that was like physical cooperation where you like get your head on my step on my shoulder and I'm going to boost you up and you're going to get over the wall and then you're going to help us get. I mean that's a little, but that's that sort of.
Were you escaping from prison, Ed?
Perhaps.
Oh, okay. Just
yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's actually there's not necessarily a reason why you couldn't have physical cooperation in a board game either.
Sure.
This is a space that escape games should be moving into if they aren't already. But also, there's no reason that a board game couldn't go in that direction too.
Those handcuffs, they're real.
Yeah, but like you can have physical puzzles where I can with respect to puzzles at least where say like the game comes with a very long piece of string and a map, and in order to figure out the answer to the puzzle, you've got to stand over there with it. I've got to stand over here with this, right? And like things like where the physical positioning of the players is part of the solution.
Yeah, and in escape rooms, there's a one down in Mountain View, and they have things where because they have somebody watching, so you have to like. Be like everyone has to be in these positions, and they're just waiting to play the music when everyone's in the right positions, right?
Yeah, they have like magnet locks that they can unlock and stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, I certainly really enjoy cooperative games. I don't know if it sounds that way like in this video, but I enjoy them. I think that also little bits of cooperation in games. Again, I think that falls into collusion. Like that falls into incentivizing people to play together.
Temporary teammates
or just table talk that's like, hey, if you do this and I do that and you do that, we can do that. I find I like that in games. I don't think would be considered a cooperative game, but I like when there's a space for players to
interact and guide each other.
Yeah.
I mean, when I play with my family, that's one of the things I enjoy, and I think they enjoy to a degree, is being able to figure things out properly. Not necessarily maximizing your strategy, but just figuring out how to engage with the game. It's not just something you do via the rulebook or just do in your head.
Right.
Sometimes it's nice to take advantage of the other players at the table.
Right.
And I think cooperative games really can help engage that mode of gameplay.
You're pretty up on Kickstarter and things coming down the pipe. Are there any cooperative games you're looking forward to that you can think of?
I'm trying to think of cooperative games I might have backed. I'm talking about the escape rooms and puzzle games. There's
tons of them.
I'm blanking on the one. There's a massive one that just funded.
Yeah, you sent me that link. It was like, we're going to send you a giant box.
It's fantastic. It sounds like it's going to be really cool, where it's a... basically, you get a box. It's the archives of an old cartoon studio.
Yeah.
You start digging through it and start finding out more of the story and the puzzles, and apparently involves cartoons you can go watch online and a ton of stuff that's in the box. And that doesn't deliver for a long, long time, but I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah. I think of the one that popped in just now, which, again, it was recently announced, was the Forbidden Sky. Though not if it gets denser. I'm not... I'd like it to be more in the Forbidden Island direction than Forbidden Desert, personally. But,
It's not on Kickstarter yet, but I think they're planning on going up this year. But I'm crazy excited for no good reason, logical reason I can identify about Iridia, Paths We Dare Tread. Which
certainly haven't even heard of it.
So it's by the same people that did Gia, Legends of the Drift System. And they haven't said very much about the game, so I'm only left with my imagination of what it could be like. But
you've designed this incredible game.
In my mind, it's amazing. But like it's been lightly promoted as this like resettable campaign game. They're calling it a Green Legacy, but that's dull marketing. It's a resettable campaign game.
Green Legacy?
Yeah.
Is that what Charterstone? What is a Green Legacy?
It means it's resettable. It means it's not actually permanent.
Okay, sure.
You can repack it and play again.
And they're missing out on Mixed Legacy games.
But the other thing that they've insisted and provided...
We could have a video on Legacy games.
Yeah. I'd love to be. I got lots
Next.
Of Next. We
might fight in that one.
To tie this back to our previous thing about role-playing games that we had talked about... the other thing that they're promoting in Iridia that they haven't talked much about mechanically is that apparently there's some mechanically relevant role-playing that'll go on. They've suggested that and the way I've imagined anyway, based on the vague things that the designer has said on BGG, is that when you go talk to an NPC, some player at the table is going to pick up that NPC's stuff and role-play as them. And there's going to be some mechanics for navigating that roleplay and incentivizing me to do it well, and which is a cool idea. So, and as far as I know, it's cooperative. But again, there's little information.
We'll find out. All right. Well, hopefully this was an interesting walkthrough on the cooperative games.
Made me excited to go play some cooperative.
Yeah, let's play right now. We're together. And so, anyway, we will be back again, I think, with some other video at some point or not, but thanks for watching.
See you later.
Hey everybody, Edo here, and thanks for watching Gaming with Edo. Reviews over here on this playlist, League and Insider videos over here on this one. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff, but most importantly, play some great games. Thanks.